Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back into the channel. Today I have a special viewer requested video for you today. Today we're going to look at how salary cap penalties actually work for you whenever you trade away players in Madden 20. I had a subscriber or viewer bring up a point that when they traded a player, they got a cap penalty for that season, and it said they would have a cap penalty for the next season, but that cap penalty for the next season never really seemed to take effect. And they were playing as the Rams. They traded away Jared Goff at some point, and so the cap penalty was pretty big. It's like a $60 million cap penalty spread out over time, and they requested that I look into how that cap penalty actually works. So I did some investigating, and I did a couple franchises here with that team to try and figure out exactly what's going on with that. So we're going to start off one more here with you guys, and I'm going to walk you through exactly what happens with the cap penalties and explain how those things are working. It's a little bit wonky. It doesn't make total sense, but I mean, it makes sense once you look at it, but it's not the way that it should be working. And so I'll show you guys that here in a second. I'm going to go ahead and switch the settings real quick so that the pop-ups are off. And then we'll start playing right away, and I'll get right into it. I'm going to go ahead and trade away Jared Goff. So the first thing I want to show you guys is the salary cap table as it is. If we go ahead and look at our salary cap, we have $20.4 million in cap space, no cap penalties, a total of $200 million in cap. And if you were to go into 2019 here and summarize all of these numbers and add them up, you would get to $20.4 million in cap space. That's accurate. That is the way that it should be, and it is working and saying that if you sign anybody this year, their cap space, that money is going to go against your cap space this year. So if you go and sign a free agent, that's going to take away from that $20.4 million in cap space. Okay, so first things first, let's go ahead and advance the week, because I want to show you guys that when we go to re-sign a player, it's showing the same thing. So when we go ahead to re-sign Andrew Whitworth, what's going on is it's going to show you your cap space for the next season. And so it's going to show you that you have $27.8 million in cap space for the following season. And so what's happening here is that it's calculating in how much cap space you already have allocated for the next season. That comes out to $27.8 million. And this is the surprising thing. These numbers get a little bit wonky once you trade away Jared Goff, but then once you get to the following season, the numbers gets strange as to how this is all working. So let me go ahead and trade away Jared Goff. Just nice and simple and easy, not going to make this more complicated than it has to be. We're going to trade away Jared Goff, and it says that we're going to end up with a massive cap penalty. If we were to cut him, his cap penalty would be around $60 million. So we're going to go ahead and trade him away, and then I'm going to show you exactly where that cap penalty shows up. So we go to salaries again, and the cap penalty is going to be spread out between 2019 and 2020. And so what this is going to show you is that we have $50 million of it allocated to 2020, and we have $10 million of it allocated to 2019. Now, what this is explaining how his money is allocated over those 2 years. It doesn't give you that breakdown in his actual contract. It's not going to tell you that that's what you were paying him in that year, because the bonus is considered one lump sum whenever they summarize it right here. But what they're saying is that $50 million of it basically was going to hit in 2020. And the way that you can identify that is if we added up all these numbers in 2020, the salary cap for it, and we subtract away his $50 million in cap penalty that we were paying him, we come out to that $27.8 million figure that we were shown before whenever we were trying to sign the players for next season, which is really interesting. It means that we're just paying out his salary for next season, and then after 2 years, his salary is off the books. So that's the first interesting thing about this, and hopefully you guys are still following along with me. Let's go ahead to try and re-sign a player. If we go over to Whitworth, it was originally showing that $27.8 million to re-sign him. However, when we now go to re-sign him, it is showing $12 million. And we know that the cap penalty for next year is 50 million. So 27.8 million minus 50 million is obviously not 12 million. So what's at play here? Why is it telling me now I only have 12 million? Well, the only thing that I can think of is that now it is taking away from your salary cap for this season. It is saying you had basically 20 something million dollars in cap space, and it's subtracting away that 10 million for this season. So this number got wonky. Once you trade away a player, I really don't know where it's coming up with this number from. So it's 20.6 million minus 10.1 million in cap space would leave you with 10.5 million in cap space this year to sign people. Next year, you're going to end up with $27.8 million regardless, because I added these numbers up and subtracted. You're going to have that $27.8 million when you factor in the $50 million cap penalty. So I really don't know where this number calculation is coming from right here, because it doesn't add up. There's nowhere that's telling me $12 million in cap room. So you can kind of disregard this number. It's going to cause you problems to try and re-sign players at this point, because it's going to say you only have $12 million in cap room, but you're going to see that cap number rise once you hit the offseason. So let's go ahead and advance to the offseason and show you exactly what's going on. Let's go ahead, advance to offseason. And so what I'm seeing here is that if you trade away a player like that, have a big cap penalty, you're going to cause a problem for yourself this season. You're going to limit your ability to actually re-sign the players that are currently on the team. You're going to have to cut players. You're going to have to try and save cap by trading players. You know, whatever it is, you're going to have to save cap by doing multiple different things. Because when you go to sign these players here at the end of the season, it's going to show you that you only have like that $9 million. See, now it's $9 million in cap space because it signed all of those practice squad players to contracts. So it's basically going off the 2019 number, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It really just, I don't know why it would be going off that and not the future year's number, because when we go forward here, I'm going to show you that we're going based off of the future year's number. So let's go ahead and advance to off-season free agent signing phase 1. So go to sign free agents, and now it's going to show us that we have $21.4 million in cap space, which is actually different than what I had come out with when I did this the last time, which is surprising. We somehow lost $7 million in cap space. I'm not sure where that's coming from, but whenever you add up these numbers, it's going to be somewhere roughly in that $20 million range. If you go ahead and add up all of these numbers, or take 212 million and subtract out all these numbers, and then also subtract out the $50 million in cap penalty, that's what your salary cap is going to be listed at. So $50 million, 212 minus 50 million minus all these 2020 contracts. This is accurate. This is saying that if you sign somebody in free agency here, you're going to be signing them to the 2020 season. And what you have left over in the 2020 season, including that $50 million caps penalty, is going to be roughly $20 million. So this is working accurately. That stuff year 1 was not working accurately. I don't know where it was pulling the numbers from, but it was not working correctly year 1. So know that if you trade a player and they have a big cap penalty, check their cap penalty before you trade them. You're going to cause yourself problems in year 1 trying to re-sign your players. However, when you get to the offseason, the numbers will be accurate. You will not have a problem re-signing players. Once you get past this phase, the salary cap penalty will never affect you again. And so here's what I mean by that. On your salary cap table, it's going to say that you have your 2020 salary cap penalty. It actually converted it to, when you get to the end of the season, what happens is it was a 2020 cap penalty. It now converted it to a 2019 cap penalty. I don't know if you guys saw that before, but when we were at the top of the screen, and I meant to point this out to you guys, it said 2019 cap penalty, 10 million, 2020 cap penalty, 50 million. Now that we are in the off season, it is saying 2019 cap penalty, 50 million, and 2020 cap penalty, 0. And so this it shifted all of the cap penalty out of 2020. Now let's go ahead and go advance to the next season and show you guys exactly what happens the next season, because this is what this person brought up to me that I didn't understand up until this point, until they brought it up to me, and it turns out that it's actually accurate. Is that once you get past the season where you trade the player and the off season, you're going to suffer no consequences for having traded that player away, even though this person has a huge cap penalty. 50 million in 2020 is what it's supposed to be. So now let me go ahead and look at my salary cap, and it's going to show you that the 50.5 million is in 2020 again, and 0 in 2021. Now this is all going to start working accurately for you. Let's go ahead and advance forward to a position where we can re-sign players. We'll go ahead and advance forward to mid-season and show you guys how exactly everything is working at this point. Some of this stuff seems a little bit hit or miss too, because as you could see, and as I exclaimed earlier, some of these numbers bounce up and down, and I don't know exactly where they're pulling the numbers from, because in any of these cases, I have not re-signed players in order to do it. So when I did the simulation, I don't know how it came out with 27 million when I tested this, and then 20 million. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't seem to add up correctly. Now, we're going to go ahead and look and see how much salary cap space we have moving forward. So if we want to negotiate with John Johnson, now we have $96 million in cap space. And here's why. This is actually working exactly the way it should be. Let's go to our salary cap table. This is the way that it should work every single year, but when you start trading players, it gets wonky. So this year, on the books, we have $16 million in cap space. That means if you add up all of these numbers and you add in that $50 million cap penalty, we only have $16 million to sign players for this season. However, after that cap penalty comes into effect and it's off the books, you're no longer going to have to face it for the future. What you have to understand is when you re-sign players in standard cases like this, you're re-signing for the next season. So it's telling you cap numbers from 2021. It's not telling you cap numbers from 2020. Being that cap penalty is off the books and some of these players aren't going to be re-signing for the next season, guys like Clay Matthew and Weddle, Nickel Roby-Coleman, Hill, these contracts aren't on the book for 2021. What it's showing you now is that you have this major amount of cap release. That $50 million is going to be off the books for next year. Some of these players are going to be off the books for next year, and so you now have $90 million in cap space. If we go ahead and add up these numbers, you're going to come out to something similar. So let me show you guys. That's 28, that's 30, that's 44, 57. We're going to go ahead with 57, 66, 73, 80, 85, 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99. We're looking at like 100, probably roughly $110 million in contracts on the book for 2021. So that's what we're looking at. So you take the $212 million in cap and subtract what I said was, like 110 million, maybe a little bit more than that, and it's going to give you somewhere in the 90s, close to $100 million in cap space. That adds up, right? So for 2021, whenever we re-sign these players in the year of 2020, it's giving us our numbers for 2021. So when I go to re-sign these players, I'm going to have uber amounts of cap space to actually do this, because that salary cap penalty is now off the books. As you see, almost $97 million in cap space. I can re-sign whoever I want. It's going to be no problem. And then when I get to the offseason, I'm going to have a ton of free cap. Now, I don't know if this is how it worked for the viewer, and I don't know if this is how it has worked for you guys in your experiences. If it has or hasn't, let me know down in the comment section. But to summarize what has happened so far is, once I traded the player in the year 2019, it was giving me really weird cap numbers for the following season, or for that season, to be able to re-sign players. Once I got to the offseason, it was giving me the accurate number, including the cap penalty, of roughly $20 million in cap space space to be able to re-sign people. The main issue came in prior to that whenever I was trying to re-sign people under the current salary, and it wasn't really liking the numbers, and it was pulling random numbers, and we couldn't really figure out where that's coming in at. But then during the off-season, re-signing my players and signing free agents, we had roughly $20 million in cap space, which was the next year's salary cap, including the $50 million cap penalty. So I want you guys to keep that in mind, that the cap penalty takes effect and is included up until that point. However, once you get into the next season, you are re-signing players for the following year. And so while we have this cap penalty of $50 million, all that would affect was the players that we signed during the 2019 offseason. The reason being is that is for the future year. And so now that we are re-signing players for the 2021 season, we're trying to get them on the books where these zeros are in the 2021 salary cap season. That cap penalty is no longer on the books. And so, yes, that's the key to what we're getting at here, is if you wanted to trade away a player, you're going to suffer a cap penalty trying to re-sign for the next season. But afterwards, you're not going to suffer a cap penalty moving forward. You would think that it doesn't work the way that you would think it would. It doesn't spread it out over the entirety of their career. If I were to cut Aaron Donald right now, it's going to spread out that cap penalty over the couple years, but it's not going to spread that out over the entirety of his contract. And I don't think it's gonna. It did that. It didn't let me cut him. Did it give me a penalty for that? It didn't immediately become clear. Yeah, there we go. So now it added a cap penalty in these first 2 years. And so the cap penalty is going to affect me for re-signing players. So as you can see, the 2021 cap penalty is $16 million. That should now affect how much I have in order to re-sign these players. So we re-signed John Johnson, which took money away from our cap space, and then we take away money from that cap penalty. But what you're seeing here is that it doesn't see what happens is it gets wonky for this season. Now I have more cap than what I had before because I saved money with cutting Aaron Donald, but his salary cap is taking into account because his salary cap penalty is actually lower than what his contract was on the books. He was on the books for like $25 million, and the penalty was somewhere in the range of like $10 million. So we made back $15 million, which was basically the amount of money that we signed John Johnson for. So I do want you guys to know that the cap penalty is going to take effect for you, and it's going to cause problems for you in the season that you're trading away a player. It's going to cause problems for you in that off season, and it is going to be factored in. However, once you move on to the next season, it's not going to be included anymore. It's going to be off the books because Madden will only spread out that salary cap penalty over 2 seasons. And realistically, it only happens over 1 season because sure, I suffer a cap penalty this season, but that's only going to affect my ability to sign free agents off the market. That's where your cap penalty comes in for that season. I should make that clear to you guys. If you go ahead and look at this salary cap table, I have $33 million in cap space currently. All that cap space number affects is what you can do free agency wise right now in the moment. What can I add to my team currently? So if I sign Aaron Donald back to my team for $11 million, that's going to take away from that $33 million that I have. That's the only thing that salary cap number plays into is your current salary cap number there. See, it took it down from 33 to 21.9. That's all that affects, that current cap space. What you need to consider is that it's not going to show you what your cap space is for the next season. And if you want to get exact numbers and you want to figure out exactly how much you're supposed to have, exactly what your cap space is for re-signing players, aside from it telling you during negotiations, you can add and subtract these numbers and figure out a rough estimate of where you're supposed to be. So you take that $212 million in cap space and subtract out all of these numbers, and then subtract out your 2021 cap penalty, which is $16 million, and then you're going to get to a number of where your cap space is actually going to be at for that year. hopefully this helped you guys out. Hopefully it gave you a little bit of information on how to account for salary cap penalties, especially when you're trading players, because previously I had thought that it would negate some of your salary cap issues if you traded away the player, but that's not the case. It's going to work just the same. It's going to take into effect the salary cap penalty. Just know that it's not going to affect you for future years. The other thing that you should keep in mind is that if you are on the receiving end of a trade, you're not going to get the salary cap penalty for that. So let me see if I can show you guys a good example of what I mean by that. If we go ahead and try and trade for a player that has a high salary cap that would have a penalty if cut, we're not going to receive any of that penalty whenever we trade for that player. So I need to go to trade deadline off. And let's see if we can find a player that would have a kind of a ridiculous salary cap penalty. Somebody on another team. I'm sure the Steelers have somebody because they have a history of rough contracts. Penalty. Ben Roethlisberger, $25 million cap penalty, 76 overall. He's old. We should be able to trade for him for a reasonable amount. It says $25 million in cap penalty. Let's go ahead and give him our first round pick and see if he'll take that. Yes. Okay. Now, the thing that you'll want to understand is that that will be a cap penalty for the team that trades him away. If we go over to our salary table, we should have no part in that salary cap penalty. That's what you'll see up there at the top. We now have still only 58.5 this year and 16 million in 2020. But if we go over to the Steelers, they should have that cap penalty spread out. As you can see, they have 23.9 in 2020 and 13.9 in 2021. So know that if you trade away a player or trade for a player, the team that trades that player away will be affected by the salary cap penalty in that year. But if you are the team receiving a player, you will not take on a penalty for that player. You will only be paying out the hard, salary cap number of their contract. So if we go to Ben Roethlisberger, there is no bonus money here that we owe him. All we are obligated to do is pay him $21 million and $19 million in 2020 and 2021. And we can cut him without recourse. We can trade him away without recourse, and I will have no cap penalty whatsoever. And so say I trade for this guy, and he's on a $20 million contract, higher than what he's actually worth, we can game the system. And I wanted to show you this as kind of the last point, because this will happen in your leagues. If there's a guy that has, like the Vikings, for example, Kirk Cousins has an awful contract based on what his production is and what his overall is. Say they trade him away to a team. Well, the player that receives him, why would you continue to pay him his ridiculous salary when you could cut him and then re-sign him for a cheaper amount, because you're not going to have a penalty? And I'll show you this with Ben Roethlisberger. So his salary is ridiculous. You're going to be able to re-sign him. So we were paying Ben $20 million a year. Let's go ahead and see what we can bring him back onto the team now for. So Ben Roethlisberger, we can now re-sign. Well, it's still not very good, but $19 million, which is lower, and we're going to suffer no penalty for having done this. We don't take on any type of cap penalty or anything, but now in our salary table we are paying him less money than we would have been because we went ahead and cut him and then re-signed him, and now we're not obligated to pay him next year. Our number went down in this season because we were just paying him the lowest amount possible, and we traded for him, so the salary cap penalty is already on the team that traded him away, and that should create no problem for us. Then I want to show you guys the example of the Vikings. If a person is the Vikings, in order to trade or cut them, they're going to suffer a huge penalty for doing so. And he's going to be $31 million on the books for whoever gets him. So let me see if I can trade for him real quick and show you guys a better example of what I mean. I go ahead and trade him. Are you going to take a second and a third, hopefully? It would put us over the salary cap. Interesting. You can have Ben Roethlisberger back. Oh, wait. That would put them over the salary cap? What? Okay, that's interesting. I don't think this is going to work because they're still over the salary cap regardless. Let's see, is there somebody with a big cap hit that we can bring in that would solve that issue? I don't think I'm going to be able to do that. Let me give this a second. I'm going to cut somebody from the team to clear our cap space and then show you guys exactly what I'm talking about. Let's go ahead and cut Ben Roethlisberger for you real quick. Free up $20 million in cap space. So now we do have some cap space currently. Let's go ahead and cut. Let's as well cut Aaron Donald. Oh, they don't have him listed at D-tackle anymore. That's right, he's a right end. Alright, now let's go ahead and see if we can trade for Kirk Cousins. Now that we have $33 million in cap space and can take on any bad contracts from that team. Vikings, because I'm sure they'll be willing to trade him away. Who has a bad cap hit that's like older? Yeah, they'll trade us Riley Reef. And then we'll give you guys a couple draft picks. Wow, you don't want that. Okay. Holy cow, you don't want to. They don't want to trade away. Let's give them Gurley. I don't even care. Just give them our best players, and hopefully they'll accept it. And that puts them over. Okay, so we're not going to be able to do it, but let me just summarize what's going to happen for you guys if you do trade for a guy like Kirk Cousins. It can be to your advantage to trade for a guy like that. I apologize for wasting your time by trying to do that, but it can be to your advantage to try and grab a guy like that. And here's the reason why. So if we go to the salary cap table, all of that money, that guaranteed money that they're paying Kirk Cousins, this $79 million bonus, that is guaranteed by the Vikings. And if they trade them, if they cut him, you have no part in that. It's not going to cost you anything to trade for him other than the compensation you're giving back. Upon trading for him, he will immediately be worth $31 million against your cap space. But as you can see, as a 76 overall, we were able to re-sign Ben Roethlisberger at $19 million. So you could trade for Kirk Cousins. He will be on your books for $31 million. You can then cut him and then sign him at $19 million and save yourself paying him $12 extra million in cap space. You can use that $12 million in cap space for something else. So it can be advantageous for you to look around your league and talk with your league mates and trade for somebody that has an excessive amount of cap space on their team. The reason being is that you can then take them, release them, and then re-sign them if you're looking to game the system and gain cap space via doing so. If they're willing to take the cap hit, they could really just do it to themselves and save themselves cap space. But it's kind of it kind of doesn't really work well in their favor unless they trade them away and get something in return. Otherwise, taking the cap penalty doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So there will be people in your leagues looking to trade away guys like this that have contracts that are too high for what they're really worth. You could go to any team and probably identify some contracts that are worth more than what the players are actually worth. A guy like maybe Mitch Trubisky is making a little bit more than this person is willing to pay up, or Bobby Massey is making $16 million in guaranteed money. They could trade him away for a return. Say you need an offensive lineman, you could bring him in and only pay him his salary, or cut him and bring him back for a cheaper salary than what you traded for him on. Hopefully the end of the video here didn't get too convoluted for you guys, and hopefully what I've talked about here today helps you in some way, just know that the cap penalty will affect you in the first season, but after the first season and off season, the salary cap penalty is going to be pretty much off your books, and signing anybody moving forward, you're going to have that cap space back. So yes, you're going to be hamstrung by trading away Jared Goff for a season. You're going to have a negative penalty for it, but the season afterwards, you're going to gain back that $50 million in cap space and be able to have the freedom to do what you want with it. So it's a trade-off of, do I want to, hamstring myself currently in order to have the flexibility in the future to do what I want, or do I want to maybe stick with this guy, try and make him better while I can, and at least be paying for somebody that's actually on my team. Typically, I stay with the latter. Typically, I don't find it advantageous to hurt myself in the off season, because there's a lot of good players in the off season that you could sign. And I would rather just keep that player on my team unless I'm getting something really good in return for them. So that's always something to consider. Like I said, hopefully this video helped you guys in some way. If it did, leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel for more, and comment down below. I already have a couple other viewer requested videos that I'm looking to make. So if you guys have any other viewer requests on what you guys would like to see, let me know right now down in the comment section, and I'll see you guys in the next one.